So I don't know about you, but it seems like summer is rolling along pretty quick. Here we are in the back half of July already. If you go to school here in Florida, then your school starts relatively soon. As August starts, I always had a problem adjusting to that early start when I had kids that were in the public school system here in Florida. And coming from New England, you don't normally start school up there until sort of the traditional after Labor Day. But down here in Florida, we start in August. So if you're in the back half of July, then your summer is running out rather than being half over. It always amazes me at how quickly things fly by. That is for sure. Speaking of school, of course, as you know, we do a school supply drive at the office at Nelson Financial Planning. So I wanted to just take a moment here at the start of the show to plug that. We're running that to September the 1st, partnering with a gift for teaching and tools for Seminole schools in a back to school supply drive. Not only that, but also old electronics for recycling as well. So if you're interested in participating, all you got to do is just stop by the office at our fabulous Winter Park, Florida location on 423 Country Club Drive. I'm still looking for the country club after all these years because there's not one nearby, but still that is the name of the street that we are on. Feel free to stop by during the hours of 9 to 5 and drop off those new school supplies if you would like to participate in the school supply drive that I think this is our third year of hosting that. So good organizations and certainly a very worthy cause. A lot of kids out there just simply do not have the resources and the funds to get the necessary schools supplies that they need to really start the year off strong. And let's face it, education is a key to improving your financial well-being. So we hope that you participate in that. As you know, earlier this summer, our office participated in the great big backpack build where you take a bunch of those supplies and put them all in a backpack. And I think our office did over 1,000 backpacks in that event held at the Orange County Convention Center. So certainly something that we encourage folks to participate in. Thinking of school, one of the things that you probably aren't going to learn in school these days is basic financial fundamentals. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we wrote our book last year, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. Still, of course, available on Amazon, a matter of fact, on a Prime basis. So if you're a Prime member, you can instantaneously or almost instantaneously get the book the very next day. I think Amazon's got it priced at $14.99. Of course, as you know, the secret way to get an absolutely free copy of our book is to schedule an absolutely no obligation free consultation with us at Nelson Financial Planning. When you come on in for that free consultation, you also get the free book. So it's not totally wasted time, and hopefully it's not wasted time anyway. But the book covers a lot of those financial concepts that we wish the next generation had a better handle on right. Things as simple as what's a stock, what's a bond, how do you create a budget, what is a good way to look at your net worth. All of that, of course, in the book. So make sure you check that out, because even though school is starting, unfortunately, financial fundamentals are not taught these days in the school system. So make sure you check out our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. So it's mid-July or late July, and I was thinking about what was going on in the headlines in the markets this past week as I was preparing for the show this morning. And it got me thinking back all the way to the first show of the year. Now, if you missed the first show of the year, and if you've missed the first show of the year for the past 25 plus years, then you know the first show of the year, we trot out our annual tongue-in-cheek exercise called the Fearless Forecast. Now, it's an interesting little exercise. It was started by my father-in-law, Jack Nelson, probably 35 plus years ago when this radio show started. And so we continue the tradition each and every year. And it's just a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek exercise where we think or we peg ourselves to a particular number on the Dow that the Dow is going to do during the course of the calendar year. And so as I was kind of observing what was going on in the markets this past week, I got thinking, seeing the Dow above 41,000, what was my fearless forecast anyway for the year? Because I remember at the time, the next week after, I had like a little bit of a forecasting remorse, if you will. And that was simply that I thought, I wonder if I might have gone a little bit too high in terms of what we thought the Dow might be at. If you missed the show, I will tell you that our fearless forecast for the year was 41,500 on the Dow. And if you don't believe me, of course, you can go to the archives, whether it's you follow us on YouTube or any of those podcast platforms, whether it's Apple or Amazon or Spotify or whatever the case may be. We, of course, have channels on each of those. To find our channel, simply search for Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. Or if you have any trouble finding us, go to the website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. And there, you'll see the icons. They'll immediately connect you over to the platforms or over to the channels on the various platforms. Make sure you then, once there, subscribe so you don't have to go through that exercise again. But 41,500 was the fearless forecast. And so lo and behold, market above 41,000 this past week, or hit above 41,000 this past week. And so it got me thinking, here we are in a period of time where we're seeing market highs and certainly seeing higher interest rates, right? So what does it all mean? I mean, can the markets continue to perform? What happens when we kind of hit these highs in the market? Do you need to kind of revise maybe what you're doing from an investment perspective? Do I need to revise my fearless forecast? I've never done that before because I always think, well, if you revise your fearless forecast for the year halfway through the year, don't you already have a lot of information that you didn't have at the beginning of the year? And doesn't that sort of undermine the purpose or the premise of a fearless forecast? So we're going to stay away from revising our fearless forecast. But interestingly, I don't recall a year where we're already this close to what we thought might happen. But it does beg the conversation of, okay, well, what next? And what does that all mean? And equally important is higher interest rates. And we've got some thoughts on that. Those higher interest rates that you're seeing may very well be the secret sauce, if you will, that is helping consumer spending. We've talked a lot about that. Seems to be a disconnect of, okay, how are we seeing consumer spending, the traveling, the eating out, all of that? Why is that still going, even though we certainly have an impact of inflation, particularly the cumulative impact of inflation over the course of the past few years? So we got some thoughts that we're going to share on this week's episode with you on that. And then the other topic that we're going to cover at length is folks that find themselves in the position of caring maybe for an elderly parent or a spouse. I am certainly in that boat on a personal basis, and it's a particularly stressful and particularly emotional time, particularly if you start to think about the transition to sort of a retirement care facility. So on this week's program, we're going to give you 4 important things to consider if you find yourself in that stressful situation of dealing with an elderly parent who needs needs to transition out of their house into some kind of a retirement care facility. All of that coming up on this week's edition of Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. So our fearless forecast that we like to do at the beginning of every year pegged the Dow at 41,500. Lo and behold, this past week you saw the Dow above 41,000. And I guess the question that raises is, can that continue? What's history say? What should you be doing with your portfolio now in light of what's going on in the market? So we got some interesting historical perspective, and then we certainly do have some recommendations for you to implement as it relates to your own investments. So welcome on into Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. Central Florida's one of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, coming to you on a host of radio stations throughout the Central Florida region. Also a top planning and podcast on the big wide world web. Check us out on any of your favorite podcast platforms, whether that's Spotify, Apple, iTunes, whatever the case may be. We've got a channel on each of those platforms, along with our YouTube channel. If you want to see what the inside of the Nelson Financial Planning radio studios looks like, you can check us out on YouTube as well. Any trouble finding us on any of those locations, go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. There you'll see the icons. Click on them. They'll get you connected. Once there, make sure you subscribe, because then you don't have to do that again. My name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we got a team of great people who also happen to be certified financial fiduciaries as well, and they stand ready to help you improve your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So, market this past week continuing to kind of hit record highs, and I guess it begs the conversation of, well, what next? What might happen next? Is there anything that I should be doing from an investment perspective these days that is different than what I might have done in the past? So for perspective, let's start with a little history lesson. So we're going to go back over the course of the past 75 years. Since 1950, the S&P 500 has reached 1,434 new all-time highs. Let me have that resonate just a little bit. Since 1950, the S&P 500 has reached 1,434 new all-time highs. So I'm going to think about that for just a second, right? As the market's going up, okay, hits another all-time new high on a closing basis. Okay, next year goes, hits another all-time high. It might go down a little bit and then comes back up. It's another all-time high. That has happened 1,434 times over the course of the past 75 years. To put that into perspective, that's an average of almost 20 a year, averaging out to over one a month. Pretty remarkable occurrence when you really stop and think about it. Really a testament to the long-term viability, strength, and ultimately investment performance over time of the markets themselves. Pretty interesting numbers when you start to look at that, right? Hitting all-time new highs on an average of 19 per year, almost 20. Average of over one per month going back over the course of the past 75 years. Pretty amazing when you stop and think about it. What's even more interesting is that since 1950, each time the S&P 500 has hit its first all-time high in a particular year, then that market index has delivered an average return that's over 17%, 17.1% in the subsequent 12 months. So what that piece of information would say is, okay, just because you're hitting an all-time high in the market, it does not mean that you are in the process of potentially a big decline, right? Just because you're hitting a high doesn't mean a decline follows. In fact, the opposite would be true. Once the market sort of hits a high, then that means that it has some strength. There must be something positive going on in the economy, in the markets. And so consequently, you typically see it making more all-time highs. So sort of the opposite of sort of what you would expect to happen, if you will, from an investing perspective. So I guess it begs the question: what should you do, right? In terms of when you see this happening, and I guess the first point is that it's certainly not particularly a time to say I'm going to get out of stocks altogether and ultimately shift the entire nature of my portfolio, but it does beg the question of, is there something that I should do to maybe readjust or fine-tune my portfolio? Because the reality is, and we saw this just this past week with a particular client, with a number of clients actually, where, let's say we've got a target investment allocation that is 75% stocks, 25% bonds, something like that, okay? And the market does well, so the stock side does well. So what happens then is that because of the performance of the stock side, you may very well be looking at your portfolio and now, instead of being 75% stocks, 25% bonds, you may be 80% stocks, 20% bonds. So as a result of the performance, right, then you wind up with perhaps a little bit of a portfolio that is a little bit riskier than what you originally sort of set out in terms of your game plan for your financial future. So that's one of the biggest reasons to kind of review the portfolio, is that chances are, particularly if we look at performance over the course of the past few years, then your stock portion, if it should have grown, and so if it has grown and the bond portion probably hasn't grown because we were in an era where interest rates were increasing, so that cuts down on the ability of bonds to appreciate, to go up in value, then your investment mix that might have been 75-25 or 70-30 a couple of years ago is probably more like 80-20, 80% stocks, 20% bonds, 85% stocks, 15% bonds, something like that. You hopefully get the idea, the concept, which then means that, the first thing, obviously, is you need to be reviewing your portfolio and looking at this stuff first and foremost. But it really begs the question of, well, at the end of the day, it's probably time to look at doing some kind of a rebalancing. And what that means is that you're looking at your portfolio and you're looking at what are potentially some areas of concentration that are different than what it was then when you first set up sort of the investment allocation that you chose for your retirement. And so if you look at it and you may say, well, I've got a much higher level of growth now, which would make sense because a lot of the growth in the market is from these tech stocks, and so I'm gonna shift out of there and put more into the dividend paying side of things, or maybe I'm going to use that to recalibrate and get back to the balance and the mix that I had between stocks and bonds. So I'm going to actually trim that and trim that out on the stock side and put that more into the bond side or the conservative side of my portfolio. So certainly, those are the kinds of things that you want to be thinking about, particularly in light of sort of where the market is, particularly when you're reviewing the portfolio. And this is certainly a theme that we've been talking about for some time now. You really also want to look for concentration. Look, the reality is that a lot of the performance of the markets as a whole has really been concentrated in a small handful of companies. We've heard the expressions of the FANGs and the Magnificent Seven, and pretty much this year it's just been NVIDIA. And how that impacts your portfolio is the narrower it gets in terms of a narrower selection of stocks ultimately driving the investment performance. You're getting concentrated, and it's all fine and dandy when it's going up, but the problem is that nothing goes up forever. And so consequently, when you see some reaction in the market, it's going to impact that much more. So those are the things you need to be careful of, because the reality is that the 30 largest stocks in the S&P 500, so 30 out of 500, that's not a lot, now have a combined weighting of over 50%, 53% in fact. So those are the things you need to kind of really be thinking about as we observe what the market is doing based on hitting new highs. So with that, we're going to take a break and continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. So more and more Americans are finding themselves in the position of being caregivers, whether that's for an elderly parent or spouse. And clearly that's a very tough, very emotional, very stressful, very anxious-filled responsibility that you have if you find yourself in that position. And, the transition, as you're trying to navigate that, transitioning from, say, the traditional home that the folks have been in for a period of time to sort of a retirement care facility, it is a pretty difficult decision. And so in this segment of the program, we want to talk about 4 unique things to be thinking about as you're starting to go through that analysis, because it is not easy. I think those that are our clients that listen to the show on a regular basis know that I, on a personal basis, have recently done this with my mom. Sold her condo about a year or so ago, and she moved into a sort of a continuing care facility. We're now in the middle of kind of doing a transition from independent living to assisted living, and I find that solely in my court, and it certainly is not easy. So if you find yourself in that same situation, my sympathies go with you, because it is stressful, and it is not easy to do. And so there's a number of considerations that we want to share with you in this segment of the program to maybe help, if you will, kind of as you go through that decision-making process about trying to make that transition with an elderly parent or a spouse, shifting from sort of the home to a retirement care facility. So that's what we'll be talking in this segment of Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We're one of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, also coming to you on a host of stations throughout the Central Florida region. Also a top planning podcast on the World Wide Web as well. So make sure you check us out on our podcast platform. Best resource to sort of find us, of course, is our website, Nelson Financial Planning. There you can also make an appointment as well. All of our consultations are free, as we mentioned earlier in the program. When you schedule a free consultation, you actually get like a free book. And that book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, is a great resource guide for folks to be able to use to get a better understanding of their finances, the economy, the markets, the headlines, all of that good stuff. Otherwise, you have to buy it on Amazon, and they charge you $14.99. My name is Joel Garris, of course, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we got a team of great folks, all of which are certified financial fiduciaries who stand ready, willing, and able to help you improve your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So we get it, because we're going through it. The anxiety, the stress, the decision to shift from a home to a retirement care facility is certainly not an easy one. And so we think that there are 4 things that you really want to kind of be thinking about as you sort of start this process. A couple of them are going to be obvious. One of them, though, is not so obvious, and so that's the one we're going to spend a little bit of time on. The sort of the most obvious ones are shop around. I mean, there's so many different types of options when you're looking at a retirement care facility. Make sure you go and look at a variety of them. I know last summer we certainly did that with my mom. Research the options. Research what services they provide, what the cost is, what the continuum of care looks like. What does independent living look like? What does assisted living look like? And ultimately, what does nursing home care look like? You want to have a handle on that, because the last thing you want to do is, go into one retirement care facility only to then have to shift to another one should there be a change in health. So you certainly want to do your research on that, know your options, and understand the financial side of it as well, right? Some of these facilities require a lump sum entry fee. Others, it's just a monthly fee, and some of the ones that, if there's an entry fee, there's also going to be a monthly fee as well. So you've got to make sure that that's part of the understanding of what the numbers are, and kind of what the future costs look like as you transition from independent to assisted to nursing, and making sure about what could happen if you do wind up having to spend a lot of money. Does the entry fee ensure that you're going to be able to stay there no matter what? Again, those are the kinds of questions to ask. So the first consideration that you want to do is make sure you're getting your ducks in a row and researching the various aspects of a particular retirement care facility that you're looking at. What the deal is, what the cost is, how it works, and ultimately what the future looks like for that particular organization. So that's probably the most obvious one, right? I mean, that's your traditional shop around, get all the information. The second, which should hopefully be obvious, is make sure that you are taking the time to really dig into your current financial situation, right? Have an understanding what your assets are, have an understanding what your liabilities are, what's my income, what's my expenses. Now, when it comes to that, though, one of the things that you have to remember in this transition is most likely, and certainly this was the case with my mom, is that you're going to probably sell the primary residence, right? I mean, there's no reason to maintain the primary residence if they are making that move to a retirement care facility. So in that case, when you sell your primary residence, a couple of things happen. First of all, the expenses of maintaining it go away, right? The taxes and, the insurance, particularly here in Florida, is pretty costly. And ultimately, when you sell your primary residence, it is effectively a tax-free transaction, assuming that the gain on it as a married couple is less than $500,000. Now, these are not new rules, but they are different rules than what a lot of people think, because the rules were different in the past. Matter of fact, we had just had a call this past week kind of talking through this one as someone was considering selling their house, and it actually had to deal directly with a situation involving a spouse that was not well. And the old rule where was one where if you sold the house, you had to turn around and reinvest the money in another house within a certain period of time in order to avoid the taxes. And that's not the case anymore. It really is. If you've lived in your house or that particular property and used it as your primary residence at least 2 of the last 5 years, then guess what? That gain is going to be excluded and ultimately generate a tax-free result when you sell the house. So that certainly, it really does impact what that overall financial picture is, and in essence really does have an impact on what your net worth picture is and what your budget picture is, because you've just engaged in perhaps probably the single biggest transaction that you're going to do, which once you sell the house. So that's kind of the first couple, right? I mean, understand, do your research, figure out what's going on, what the deal is with the retirement care facility, and then do an in-depth dive into your financial picture and what it looks like, taking into account the notion of selling the house. Now, here's where you want to spend a little bit of time on, because this one it sort of gets a little bit more involved. There are some tax savings associated with kind of this transition. We just talked about the sale of the house being tax-free, but understand that the entry fee for these types of facilities and the ongoing expenses, particularly the medical portion of those ongoing expenses, are in fact tax deductible, right? They're tax deductible as a medical expense. So if you paid a big entry fee, that's most likely a large chunk of that is going to be a medical expense. So if you have a medical expense that's much, much higher for a particular year, then you certainly want to think about, okay, if I'm going to use money to pay that entry fee, where do I want to use that money from? And that may mean that you're using money out of your IRA that is taxable, but now you have a resulting larger deduction than what you might otherwise have. So this is a pretty important concept. And so we're going to go to the break. When we come back, we're just going to kind of recap this one, because I think this is one of the more important things to be thinking about if you're in the process of transitioning someone from their home to a retirement care facility. That coming up next here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. So we're talking about some of the considerations that you need to be thinking about when it comes to moving someone from their home into a retirement care facility. More and more Americans are finding themselves in the positions of having to be caregivers for elderly parents or spouses. Certainly I find myself in that situation these days with my own mother. And the process of making that transition obviously is not easy, filled with emotion and anxiety and stress. And so on the program, we're sort of sharing some things to be thinking about to hopefully alleviate that. It goes without saying, make sure you investigate all of the options that you have in terms of retirement care facilities, making sure you have an understanding of exactly what the deal is, entry fee, what that looks like, what the monthly fee is, what the services that they provide, those kinds of things. So bottom line, of course, as with anything, it's a major purchase. Make sure you do your research. The second thing, of course, is make sure you have an understanding of your financial picture, right? What your assets look like, what your liabilities look like, what your income looks like, what your expenses looks like. Making sure that you sort of overlay the fact that in most cases, you're going to sell the primary residence and ultimately move into a retirement care facility. The sale of that house, for the most part, is going to be tax-free. If you don't have the house anymore, you also don't have those expenses as well. So fundamentally, a pretty big shift in terms of what that overall economic picture looks like. So you certainly want to spend some time getting an understanding of what your overall financial picture looks like as you're making that transition. The third thing, which is what we were talking about just before the break, is there's definitely some tax tricks, if you will, or some ways to save some money on your taxes as a result of this transition. More often than not, these entry fees are treated as medical expenses. And because of that, then now you can use them as part of your itemized deductions. In addition, some of a portion of the monthly cost, and in case of a nursing home, it's basically all of the monthly cost because all of that care is medical. Any of that is medical then winds up being a deduction. Here's the thing about medical expenses. You either get to use them to offset your income or you lose them. They are not like, say, charity, where a charitable contribution, if you wind up not being able to fully use it in that particular year, you get to carry it forward to a future tax year. Medical expenses, there's no carry forward. So if you've got that entry fee, maybe what you want to do is take out money from a retirement account. Yes, it's going to be fully taxable, but you see you have the offsetting medical expense deduction that helps to reduce down the taxable amount of that IRA distribution. That was exactly what we did with my own mother when we moved from her home to a retirement care facility last year. Entry fee, that was a medical deduction. We wound up taking much more out of our IRA to sort of cover that entry fee, but that medical expense deduction offset the tax implications of that distribution out of her retirement account. So those are just some of the sort of the tax little tricks or the tax nuances that you need to be aware of when you're thinking about this transition. And then lastly, it certainly is a perfect opportunity to review the legal documents, because hopefully if you're making this transition, it's not sort of at the 11th and a half hour. Hopefully folks still have the capacity to sort of make those decisions. And really what you want to be thinking about is who the decision makers are, right? Who is it that has that power of attorney? Who is it that is the executor? And who are those decision makers? And then ultimately, who's getting what? But I think the decision maker conversation is one that often gets glossed over because I think folks sort of focus on, okay, how do I divide this up? But you surely want to make the decision makers along the way people that you can ultimately trust and have comfort with. So make sure you really take it as an opportunity to review those legal documents and review ultimately who are the decision makers that would ultimately be able to act under various circumstances. So clearly not an easy period of time, not an easy decision, pretty stressful, pretty high anxiety. And hopefully, the steps that we've outlined on the program this week helps give you a little bit more of a perspective in terms of what you need to do, right? Understand, what the options are when you're looking at a retirement care facility. Understand what the overall financial picture is. Understand what some of those tax tricks, if you will, are. And then lastly, use it as an opportunity to kind of really take a look at ultimately who the decision makers are in those various legal documents. Hopefully you'll find that if you follow those, then you'll hopefully reduce some of the stress involved with that kind of a transition. Thinking a little bit more about the conversation we were having earlier in the program about kind of the market hitting higher highs. We were talking a little bit about some of the things that you might be needing to do from an investment perspective. And we talked a little bit about sort of rebalancing, reviewing the portfolio, looking at the mix for stocks versus bonds, things like that. The stock portion would have grown, so that means that you're probably a little out of whack in terms of what your current investment allocation is versus what it was when perhaps you set up your retirement plan. So that needs to be adjusted. The other thing that we mentioned is this concentration issue, which we're becoming more and more concerned about this, because when we look at the 30 largest stocks in the S&P 500, the combined weight of the 30 largest stocks in the S&P 500, so that's 30 companies out of the 500 that are in there. So that's a pretty small number. Right now, the 30 largest stocks constitute a combined weighting of over 50%, 53% in fact. For comparison purposes, just to kind of reference this, in June of '99, which was the peak of the dot-com bubble, the 30 largest stocks at the peak only amounted to a combined weighting of 42% of the overall index. So one of the things that we're talking about with rebalancing is to really kind of look at that concentration, because the market has really gotten concentrated. And some could argue it is more concentrated than it ever has been, even exceeding some of those prior concentration peaks that ultimately did not play out particularly well, which underscores the things that you need to be doing now in terms of rebalancing and reallocating, particularly if you're finding that kind of concentration in your overall account. So certainly something pretty important there. Lastly, I guess I came across this particular statistic about the impact of higher interest rates on consumer spending. We're seeing higher interest rates, and what's the impact? Because a lot of the big question mark is, okay, you got everybody out traveling, going to Europe, enjoying, going to restaurants, things like that. Well, maybe not everybody, but a disproportionate amount of people are. And it begs the question of what the impact is that these higher interest rates are providing from a positive perspective, in that if you're getting higher interest rates, ultimately you're earning more interest. Well, here's the stat that we wanted to leave you with on the program. So if you look at the first quarter of this year, Americans earned about $3.7 trillion from interest and dividends, according to the Commerce Department. That was an increase of 5x, fivefold over that first quarter of just 4 years ago, when that number was $770 billion. So 5 times greater consumer interest certainly does lead to higher level of spending. And I think there may be more of a correlation there than what you've been hearing, particularly when you start to look at the fact that it is a five-fold interest in the amount of interest and dividends that the consumer has. And certainly when you look at consumer spending and why it has been able to hold in and hang in as well as it has, certainly one would look at that statistic and say, maybe that's the reason that it continues to do as well as it is. So anyway, we will leave you with that thought and wrap on up and get on out of here. This, of course, has been Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We appreciate the opportunity to come to you each and every week to give you perspective on your finances. If you have questions or would like to set up an absolutely free conversation, just visit our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. There you can schedule that absolutely free conversation. And don't forget, when you do that, you get a free copy of our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, as well. We're going to wrap it up and get on out of here. This has been Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on Dollars and Cents.